14 years after my foster son told me I was nothing to him, I sat in the back row of a hotel ballroom and watched him stand at a podium in a good suit and tell 400 people that he'd made it on his own. I didn't have a family, he said. I had a system. And I had one scholarship that somebody I've never met decided to give a kid who had nothing. The room applauded. My hand stayed in my lap. And then the screen behind him lit up with the photograph of the woman that scholarship was named after. The woman whose name he'd been thanking in letters for 14 years without ever once knowing who she was. I watched my son turn around and look at his mother's face. And I watched him stop breathing. But to understand why a 64-year-old man was sitting in the back of that ballroom with his coat already over his arm, you need to know what Daniel screamed to me the night he turned 18. And you need to know what I did about it. My name is Walter. Most people call me Walt. I'm 64 years old. For 32 years, I fixed school buses. That's it. That's the whole resume. I started at 19 in a district maintenance yard in the county I still live in, and I spent my 20s flat on my back on cold concrete under diesel engines that hauled other people's children to school every morning. My hands still don't come fully clean. My knuckles have a permanent map of scars on them. There is no glamour in it, and I've never once pretended there was. Here's what nobody understood about that job, though, least of all my own family. Every school district in the state has buses. Every one of those buses has to run at 6 in the morning, in January, in the rain, with 40 kids waiting on a corner, or the whole district is on the news by noon. And almost nobody wants to do that work. It's cold, it's thankless, and it's invisible. So when I was 34, I stopped fixing buses for one district and started a company that fixed them for everybody. Hail Fleet Services. We service school buses, then municipal fleets, then transit, then ambulances. We didn't do anything clever. We just showed up every time before dawn, and we never once left the district stranded. Boring. Invisible. And it made money the way a slow river makes a canyon. Not dramatically, just relentlessly for 30 years. I sold that company 3 years ago when I was 61. A little over $9 million. I still live in the same house. I still drive a truck with 200,000 miles on it. My neighbors think I'm a retired mechanic on a pension, which is exactly what I am, and also not. But none of that, not $1 of it, is the reason I'm telling you this story. I'm telling you because of June. I married June Marchetti when I was 26 and she was 24, and I want to be careful how I say this next part because I've had 15 years to find the words and I still don't have good ones. June was the best person I have ever met. Not the nicest, the best. There's a difference. Nice people avoid trouble. June walked toward it. We couldn't have children. We tried for 11 years, and somewhere in there the trying stopped being hope and started being grief. And one night at the kitchen table, June looked at me and said, very simply, Walt, they're already children. So we got licensed. And for 19 years, kids came through our house, some for a weekend, some for a year. Some of them still call me at Christmas. Some of them I never heard from again, and I've made my peace with that, mostly. And then, when I was 44, they brought us Daniel. He was 12 years old. He came up our driveway holding a black garbage bag with everything he owned in it. And I want you to sit with that image for a second because I have every day since. 12 years old. A garbage bag. He'd been in 6 placements in 4 years. He was, and I say this with love, an absolute terror. He broke things. He lied about things he didn't even need to lie about. He'd stand in the kitchen and stare at me with his flat, dead-eyed look, waiting for me to yell, because yelling was a language he understood and kindness wasn't. 3 months in, he took my truck keys and put a dent in the tailgate, backing it into a mailbox. And when I found him, he was already packed. Garbage bag by the door. 12 years old, and he'd pack himself before I could send him away, because at least that way he'd have done it first. I didn't send him away. I said, get in. You're going to help me fix it. And we spent that Saturday in the driveway with a dent puller and a can of touch-up paint, not talking, and that was the first day Daniel Reyes ever stayed anywhere past the first mistake. June, of course, got there faster than I did. June always did. By the time he was 13, she had him doing crossword puzzles with her on Sunday mornings. And by 14, he was reading, really reading, the way kids do when they found the exit door out of their own head. And by 15, he was arguing with her about books at the dinner table with his whole face lit up. And I would just sit there with my coffee, a bus mechanic listening to two brilliant people go at it, thinking I had never in my life been so rich. We tried to adopt him. He said no. He was 15. He'd been told he was going to be adopted before, twice, and it hadn't happened. And he wasn't going to be stupid twice, his words. And June, who wanted it more than she wanted her next breath, just nodded and said, "Okay, sweetheart. The offer doesn't expire." He never took the name. He stayed Daniel Reyes. He kept his mother's name, and I never once asked him not to, because it wasn't mine to ask. Then, when Daniel was 17, June got sick. I'm not going to make you sit through that. 9 months, start to finish. I'll only tell you one thing about it, and it's the only thing that matters. Daniel didn't leave her side. Not once. 16-year-old boys run from hospital rooms, and this one didn't. He sat with her and read to her when she couldn't hold a book anymore, and he did her crossword out loud. And when she couldn't answer, he'd say, "It's okay, I got it," and fill in himself. She died on a Tuesday morning in April with her hand in his. And 2 months later, he screamed at me. I made every mistake a grieving man can make. I want that on the record. I couldn't talk about her. I couldn't say her name without my throat closing, so I didn't say it. And Daniel, who was 17 and who had just lost the only mother who ever chose him, took my silence for what it looked like. Coldness. He needed somebody to fall apart with him. And instead he got a man who went out to the garage at 6 every morning and stayed there. So we didn't grieve together. We grieved in the same house, 10 feet apart, for 2 months, which is a special kind of cruelty that nobody means to commit. And then he turned 18. 18 means something specific to a foster kid. 18 means the check stops. 18 means the state's obligation ends and the world says good luck. And I knew that, and I've been planning for it for years, and I did the thing I thought was right. I sat him down at the kitchen table with a folder. Community college first, then transfer, the whole plan, tuition, books, an apartment near campus if he wanted it, or his room here for as long as he liked. I've been putting money aside since he was 13. I slid it across the table like the world's worst salesman, and I said, "It's covered, Danny. All of it. You just go." And he looked at the folder, and then he looked at me, and I watched something behind his eyes come off its hinges. "You think this makes you my father?" he said. Quiet at first. "You think you can write a check, and that makes you my—" I said, "Daniel, that's not what this—" And that's when he screamed it. "You were never my real dad." 18 years old, standing in June's kitchen, and I've never heard a human voice do what his did. You were a check from the state. That's all you ever were. They paid you to keep me, and now she's gone, and there's no reason for me to be here. So don't sit there and by me like. And his voice broke clean in half, and he said, much smaller, "She's the only one who ever wanted me. Not you. Her. And now she's gone. And here's the thing I need you to understand. He wasn't wrong about the important part. He was wrong that I didn't want him. But he was right that I never told him I did. Not once. Not in 6 years. I fixed his truck, and I paid his fees, and I sat at his conferences, and I never, not one single time, said the sentence out loud. I thought showing up was the sentence. That's what men my age were taught. Show up, shut up, and the showing up says it. It doesn't. It doesn't say it. He needed to hear it, and I never said it. And then his mother died, and all he had left was a man in a garage and a folder full of money. He left that night. Garbage bag, a real suitcase, Actually, one June had bought him, which somehow made it worse. And I stood in the driveway, and I didn't say anything because I'd had 6 years to learn how to say something, and I hadn't bothered. Here's the problem I sat with for the next 4 months. Daniel would never take $1 from me. Not one. He'd made that as clear as a human being can make anything. Every offer I made from that point forward was going to sound like the same thing to him. A man buying a son. He was 18 years old, brilliant, and about to go work a warehouse job instead of going to school out of pure grief-fueled pride. So I did the only thing I could think of. If he wouldn't walk through my door, I'd build him a door with somebody else's name on it. I called a lawyer and then a foundation administrator, and in October of that year, we established a small scholarship fund for students aging out of the foster care system in our county. Full tuition, renewable 4 years, books, housing stipend. 14 recipients a year once it got going. I funded it out of the company at first. When I sold Hail Fleet Services 3 years ago, I endowed it permanently. $2.4 million in perpetuity, so it doesn't need me anymore. I made exactly 2 rules. 1, the donor stays anonymous. Permanently. Not anonymous unless someone asks. 2, the fund is named after my wife. Not Hale. He'd have smelled Hale from a mile away and torn the letter up. The Marchetti Award. Her maiden name. The name she had before she met me. The name he'd never once heard. Because what teenage boy learns his foster mother's maiden name? Why would he? It's on a marriage license in a drawer and nowhere else in the world. Then I made 1 phone call to a guidance counselor at his old high school. I didn't tell her a thing. I just said, there's a new scholarship for kids aging out. Make sure Daniel Reyes knows it exists. He applied in January. He won in March. And in August, my son went to college on his mother's name and never knew it. Now, I need to tell you about the letters. The foundation has a policy, and it wasn't my idea. I swear to you it wasn't. Every Marchetti recipient writes an annual letter to the donor. It's standard. Good practice, keeps the kids connected to the gift, teaches gratitude. The foundation forwards those letters, unopened, to a P.O. box. Mine. They start Dear Donor. I have 14 years of them in a shoebox on the top shelf of my closet, and I have read every single one so many times the folds are going soft. Dear Donor, I don't know who you are. I got a 3.8 this semester, and I don't know who to tell, so I'm telling you. Dear Donor, I'm the first person in my family to do this. I don't really have a family, so I guess I'm the first person in myself. Dear Donor, I switched my major. I'm going to teach. I know that's not what people expect from someone who was given this much money, and I'm sorry if that's a disappointment, but I met a kid on my student placement who had a garbage bag, and I need you to understand what that did to me. That one, I sat in my truck in the post office parking lot and read 4 times. Dear Donor, I got the job. I'm a teacher. Dear Donor, vice principal now. If you're a real person and you're still out there, you should know I say your name, or her name I guess, to every single kid I meet who thinks they're finished. I tell them somebody they never met decided they weren't. Dear Donor, I have a daughter. Her name is Maya. I've never met her. My granddaughter. I found out about her from a form letter forwarded by a foundation in a P.O. box from a man who doesn't know I exist. That's not a complaint. I want to be very clear about that. That was the price, and I set the price myself, on purpose, with my eyes open. He got a life. I got a shoebox. That was always the deal, and I would sign it again tomorrow. I just didn't expect them to invite him to speak. Every year the foundation does a donor gala. I've gone to all 14. I sit in the back, I clap, I leave before dessert, and nobody has ever once asked me who I am, because I look exactly like what I am, a retired mechanic in his one good jacket. This year, they announced their keynote 3 weeks out. Their proudest alum, a Marchetti recipient, class of the very first cohort, now a vice principal and a nationally recognized advocate for kids aging out of foster care. Daniel Reyes. I should not have gone. I know that. Carol, the foundation director, the only living person who knows who funds that money and who's kept it for 14 years like a vault, called me herself and said, "Walt, are you sure?" I said I'd sit in the back. He was magnificent. That's the thing. He stood up there in a good suit, 32 years old, completely at ease, and he had 400 donors in the palm of his hand in 90 seconds. He talked about the garbage bag. He talked about 6 placements in 4 years. He talked about being 18 and having nothing and no one. I didn't have a family, he said. I had a system. And I had one scholarship that somebody I've never met decided to give a kid who had nothing. Whoever you are, and I've been writing to you for 14 years, you didn't just pay for my degree. You're the first person who ever bet on me and didn't want anything back. 400 people applauded. I sat in the back with my hand in my lap, and I thought, son, I have wanted something back every single day. I wanted you to come home. I just wasn't allowed to say so. And then Carol went up to close the evening, and she said the thing I never saw coming. Before we finish, many of you have asked about the woman this award is named for. We've never shown her. Tonight, with the family's permission, we'd like to. The screen came on, and there was June, the photo from a porch. The one from the summer Daniel was 14, her laughing at something off camera, the sun in her hair. June Marchetti Hale. 1961 to 2011. Daniel had been walking off the stage. He stopped. I watched him from 60 feet away, and I watched my son turn and look up at that screen, and I watched his face do something I have never seen a face do. He didn't cry. That came later. He just stopped. Everything stopped. His hand came up halfway toward the screen and stayed there, like a man reaching for something in a dream. And then, very slowly, he turned around and started looking at the room. 400 faces. Looking for one. I stood up. I had my coat over my arm. I always do. I always leave early. And I got about 4 steps toward the door. Walt. The whole room went quiet. I stopped. I turned around. He came down off that stage and across that ballroom. And he was crying by the time he got to me, in front of 400 donors, and he grabbed the lapels of my one good jacket in both fists like a drowning man. How long? He said. Danny, how long? 14 years, I said. And my son, 32 years old, 6'2", vice principal, put his forehead down on my shoulder in front of 400 people and came apart. We sat in my truck in the parking garage for 2 hours. He kept saying, "You should have told me." And I kept saying, "You'd have torn it up." And the maddening thing, the thing that made us both start laughing at about the 90-minute mark, was that we were both completely right. "Why our name?" he finally asked. "Why not yours?" And I told him the truth. "Because you'd have never taken mine," I said. "You told me that yourself in that kitchen. So I gave you hers. You'd have taken anything from her." He was quiet for a long time. I said, "You were never my real dad." "I know. Walt." I was 18 and my mom was... Danny. I had to stop him. "You don't owe me that. You were a kid who lost the person who loved him most, and you needed somebody to be angry at, and I was the one standing there. That's not a crime. That's just Tuesday for a boy who's lost something. But you, and I never told you. That was the hard part to get out. Took me a second. 6 years. I never once said out loud that I wanted you. I thought showing up said it. I looked at the concrete wall. It doesn't. I learned that too late, and then I spent 14 years saying it in a way you couldn't hear. That's on me, son. Not you. You didn't say anything for a while. Then say it now." So I did. 64 years old, in a parking garage, and I finally said the sentence. I drove him back to my house at midnight, and I got the shoebox down off the closet shelf, and I put 14 years of his own handwriting in his hands. He sat on June's couch and read his own letters. "Dear donor, dear donor, dear donor." with his hands shaking, and when he got to the one about Maya, he made a sound I'll be hearing for the rest of my life. "You knew about her," he said. "You knew I had a daughter, and you." "I know she likes horses," I said. "You mentioned it in year 12. Maya is 4. She came to my house 3 weeks later. She calls me Grandpa Walt, which she decided entirely on her own within about 11 minutes of meeting me. Daniel comes on Sundays now. We do June's crossword. He's better at it than I am, which surprises exactly nobody. He asked me, a few months back, why I never argued that night. Why I never once, in 14 years, tried to correct the record and tell him I was his real dad. And I've thought about it a lot, and here's my honest answer. He was right. I was never his real dad. Real dads are the ones you're stuck with. Real dads are an accident of biology, a thing that just happens to you, and half the world is walking around damaged by one. I wasn't that. I was the man who chose him. Every year, for 14 years, from the back row of a ballroom, with my name off the check. Anybody could be a real dad. It takes nothing. I'd rather be the one who chose. Here's what I've come to believe, after 64 years and one shoebox full of letters. Love that needs credit isn't love yet. It's a transaction wearing love's coat. The realest thing I ever did for my son, I did with my name deliberately scraped off it. And the only reason it worked is that I never for 1 second needed him to know. But I'll tell you the other half of that, because it cost me 14 years and I don't want it to cost you the same. Say it out loud. Showing up is not the same as saying it. I thought it was. I was wrong for 6 years, and it nearly cost me a son forever. If there is someone in your life who you would quietly build a door for, tell them. Today, use the words. Don't make them find out from a photograph on a screen in a room full of strangers. If you've ever loved someone in a way they never knew about, or if someone did that for you and you only found out later, I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this one, hit subscribe because there are a lot more quiet men out there and a lot more shoeboxes on a lot more closet shelves. I'll see you in the next one.